Hello, everybody. Let's talk about ankle sprains. Let's do it. I have my handy dandy pool noodles here to help me demonstrate what's going on with ankle sprains. I keep getting a lot of questions about ankle sprains. So let's start with the basics. There are two kinds of ankle sprains. High ankle sprains and low ankle sprains. A high ankle sprain really involves the tissue between your leg bones. So if these are your leg bones, and I know, bear with me. If these are your leg bones and this is your foot right here, when you have a high ankle sprain, a lot of times what happens is like a running injury or sort of a more high impact injury where your foot is flexed. And so your ankle gets twisted in a flexed position. And when your ankle is in that flexed position, it doesn't have a lot of flexibility in the ankle bone, like the heel ankle connection. I know I'm just using my arm because it's easier. Take that off. In that heel ankle connection, it's in a really sort of compact position. And so what happens is there's sort of an unnatural, unnecessary torsion of these two leg bones on each other as they come into that flexed foot. And so the tissues between and surrounding your leg bones, the upper part of your ankle. So if you think about your ankle, your leg bones come down and then your foot and ankle heel bones join in there. And so if you have a torsion on these or a tearing or a muscle injury on those, that's what they refer to as a high ankle sprain. That is something you should definitely get checked out by your doctor. They might do imaging. They might give you some sort of like orthoses, something to sort of hold your leg so it's in a stable resting position. But that depends on what exactly the tissue damage was and what the sort of rest and recovery time is for that. A lot of times that's right, rest, ice, elevation, and you want to sort of keep it relatively immobile. That is on the recommendation of your doctor, your physical therapist, all the people who have physically examined it and assessed really what's going on with that high ankle sprain. So a good key for you is if you were doing some sort of high activity, your foot was in a flex position. So when your foot was here, it was in that position. Then that is a good indicator that you may have damage to the upper part of your ankle or a high ankle sprain. If you're uncomfortable, either way, get it checked out. Don't question getting it assessed by your doctor, your physical therapist, urgent care, whatever level of urgency you feel like needs to be assessed. You should probably go with that because you can create or have more damage than you think when it comes to an ankle sprain, and so you should get it assessed properly. The other type of ankle sprain is a low ankle sprain, or what we think of when we think of an ankle sprain. And that's like, I stepped into a hole, my ankle twisted, my leg went one way. I either rolled my ankles in or I rolled my right ankles out. I tripped on something. So the lower ankle sprain is going to be more likely when you have a pointed foot position than a flex foot position. It just lends itself to a little more floppiness in the ankle. I know it's a wrist in an ankle joint as opposed to when it's in that flex position. And so again, rest, ice, elevation, all key components of recovering from an ankle sprain. We don't necessarily want to immobilize an ankle sprain, but we do want to listen to it, right? So ankle sprains can come with a lot of swelling, a lot of bruising, a lot of tenderness, and definitely the inability or like a very strong feeling that you don't want to weight bear on it. In those instances, absolutely get it checked out. Make sure that you didn't pull a little piece of bone off with your tendon, or that you didn't break something that absolutely should not be broken, or that you didn't rupture a tendon. All of those things are good things to rule out. If you've been checked out by your doctor and they do say it's an ankle sprain, you really want to let your symptoms be your guide. If it's swollen, you should absolutely be wrapping it with an ACE bandage and getting it above your heart for 20 minutes, 3 to 5 times a day. And when I say above your heart, I don't mean laying on the couch. I mean legitimately, here's your head, here are your legs. Your legs are up in the air above your heart. So the way that we clear swelling is through gravity and muscle pumps. And so muscle pumps are when our muscles are efficiently working, they're pumping the fluid throughout our bodies, making sure that we get good nutrients in and the waste products go out. But when we have an injury, swelling puts compression on our muscles and our lymphatic system, so we can't get as much junk out, but we also can't get as much good nutrition in for our muscles and joints. And so we have to ask gravity to help us alleviate that. And gravity can only do that if it's above your heart. Your heart is the pump. Gravity needs to be able to push it downhill, back into your circulatory system, into your lymphatic system. So I know people say, oh, elevate your leg, but that doesn't mean sitting at your desk chair with your leg on another chair off to the side. It legitimately means your leg should be above your head. Same goes with any other body part, like get it above your heart. In gravity. So if you need to think about where gravity is and where your heart sits in gravity, get your body part above that in gravity. And sometimes that means bringing your heart lower and your leg higher. You don't need to stand with your leg over your head and be super impressive, but not the most economical use of your time, I guess. Managing your bruising, managing your swelling. Bruising and swelling can be helped with kinesio tape. With your physical therapist should be skilled in how to use kinesio tape to manage your swelling and your bruising. Those are really good tools to help that. Compression. So a low level ACE bandage or 2B grip sometimes is helpful. Depends on what kind of swelling you're having, how much, how often, how long, stuff like that. But also moving your body part helps with those muscle pumps. We talk about the muscle pumps clearing the fluid. As long as you have been cleared to move your body part, there are a lot of ways you can move your body part that are non-weight bearing and non-painful. One of them being ankle pumps. So point and flex your foot. Obviously using my hand again, crushing it with the hand foot interchange game today. So really firing your muscles. So you want to flex and bend with intention. You want your calf muscles to really fire. You can do that in a laying down position, so completely out of gravity. You can do that in a seated position where you just sort of do like a heel raise from your chair. So you're pushing down and lifting your heels up, dropping your heels down, getting your muscles to fire a little bit more like that. If they're feeling okay with that, you can do an ankle pump in standing. So a heel raise. Again, you don't want it to be painful. You don't want to create a pain association with your brain. You want it to be pain-free. You want it to be manageable, but you do want to keep it moving. So on my blog, there's a series of exercises that you can do after your initial recovery. So when it's no longer painful, I put up a whole list of exercises that are really good for strengthening your ankles before injury. If you have a chronic history of ankle sprains, there's a potential that your ankles are a little bit more mobile than perhaps they were one day. And it's a really good idea to strengthen up your calves, your ankles, your foot musculature, those little grabby toe muscles, just to sort of give it more support in future endeavors, so you don't roll your ankle again. If you do sort of chronically roll your ankles, you will notice that every time you roll them, they're a little less painful and a little less swollen and a little less bruisey. Mostly because those tendons and ligaments are getting stretched out to a point where they're not necessarily the most supportive. So doing those exercises to support your foot and ankle complex are really helpful. Stretching, a good stretching program before you do any high impact exercises is always good. And I know everybody says, warm up and stretch. But it's really it's really valuable, especially as you get older. It's incredibly valuable to stretch out your body parts and make sure that things aren't getting too tight. So that when you do have the potential for an injury, you trip and fall, you step in that hole in the soccer field, you run after the dog and eat it on a stick, who knows? Your body has the ability to recover because the muscles are at the right length. So there's my 2 cents on ankle sprains. And if you have any questions, let me know. Yeah, we'll see you for the next one. Bye.